Okay, everyone. So good evening and welcome to another live stream. And I know there is this little ever so annoying time lag on YouTube. So I don't want anyone to miss any of the our very important words. So as you join, which seems to take a few seconds actually, as you come on the stream, yeah, I can see it all starting to happen now. I want to give you all a warm welcome to another week. And before we actually get into the mainstream, you may wonder why I am dressed in this way. Well, let me bring on Rebecca. Actually, Rebecca, I'm sure you can figure why I'm dressed in this particular way. And actually, folks, it's because my very good Indian friends sent me as a Diwali gift this shirt, a long shirt, which is the kurta, I think it's called, Rebecca. Am I right?
Yeah.
So this is my. So I just wanted to thank my many Indian friends and followers. Thank you very much for the gift. I know today is the final day of the Diwali festival. I know it was Saturday was the sort of the midpoint, but it includes today. So I just about sneaked it in. And again, I just wanted to reach out. Thank you all. And just as a final thing, I just wanted to put this up. I know I wished you it all on Saturday. I'm repeating it now. And Rebecca, I'm sure you'd agree that, I mean, some of the very best people, certainly in this country that I've come across, are Indian friends, be they Hindu, Sikh, whatever. And I'm sure and obviously I know you've got a heritage from India as well. So I'm sure you'd want to join me in wishing our friends a happy Diwali.
Yes, absolutely. Happy Diwali to everybody. And I don't know if you know this, but actually the Diwali festival is timed to the full moon.
Yep.
So where I lived on the beach in Bombay, it was always categorized by the super high tide, so super spring tide, high water as well, which comes on the full moon. So always a very exciting time for us because we had the water lapping into our garden at home from the So yeah, happy Diwali everybody, and may everybody be blessed.
Yeah, it's a festival, Rebecca, which marks the victory of light over the darkness and good over evil. And you don't have to necessarily be of Hindu or Sikh persuasion to fully get that. And, you know, whatever faith you have, or if you've got no faith at all, I still think those are very noble sentiments. And so, as I say, for all our friends, I know you watch me in this one. I just wanted to let you see that I've got it on me. It fits me. And it's part of my wardrobe going forward. So thanks again, folks. Okay.
On the topic of victories and good over bad, or better over good, Andrew Goodrich, you've beaten somebody who shall now remain nameless because they haven't come first. Andrew, amazing result. I mean, look at you. I think you've been on for 45 minutes. So you beat he who cannot be named. Well done, Andrew.
Yes, I'd like to echo that. Congratulations, Andrew, for being first amongst equals on our stream this evening. But you've been extraordinarily quick off the mark. And the person who shall remain nameless needs to get their finger out and needs to be logging in. Probably, I don't know, Rebecca, hours beforehand to be sure.
Yeah, get in at lunch.
So hey, listen, Rebecca, as we were saying just before we came on air, you know, folks, we don't really plan these sort of discussions we have that far before the day, and we've never needed to because events just conspire to bring them about. And so the news has been, and this is what we're going to talk about, Rebecca, that over the last 72 hours, Downing Street has featured very prominently. And there was an image I wanted to flip this one up, because it's kind of an image I didn't think I was going to see, but it is there. And as you can see, there's Dominic Cummings with his box walking out through the doors of Downing Street on Friday night. having, I think earlier in the day, it was said that he was going to be staying on. He wasn't going to be leaving, unlike this chap, Ian Kane, I think, who left, also a director of communications, earlier in the Friday. So there was a mass exodus. And actually, Rebecca, this was the image I laughed at the most. This one, bring it up. True romance, but not all romances live happily ever after. And so it is. So what do you make of the extraordinary events in Downing Street? Because I've seen your tweets, but tell us what you think.
Well, I think on this occasion, Princess Diana won the battle of the three people in this marriage. And I heartily disapprove, actually. I cannot tell you how hard I disapprove of this. I do not agree with the other commentators, the female commentators, that this is a victory of feminism. Quite the opposite. This is how to obtain a position of power if you are overprivileged, entitled, and 23 years younger than the Prime Minister. I'm sorry, I have really, I have nothing but utter disregard. And Allegra Stratton, by the way, was apparently crying, as she told The Guardian, crying over the briefing against her. Well, I didn't see any briefing against her.
No.
And why was she crying? Women don't cry, okay? People in professional jobs don't cry.
No.
It's unacceptable. And now to be screaming about being briefed against, what are they doing? They are briefing. Allegra and Carrie are briefing. And it's absolutely outrageous. I mean, he who briefs last briefs longest, I think. It's pretty unacceptable. And it's like a bitch fight with two people. I mean, Allegra, I'll give her some credit, but what has Carrie ever done in her life? Ever? She's never held down a job for more than a year. She pisses everybody off. She's entirely entitled, and she's not particularly bright. Sorry to offend, but she's got a degree in theatre studies.
That's right. Yeah. I think, Rebecca, the thing about this one is that, I mean, you and I have talked before about Dominic Cummings, and Dominic Cummings clearly has his shortcomings, so to speak, as we all do, and he's a flawed man, as I am, and I believe probably most people are. But he proved himself in the political sphere. You know, he did help deliver the Brexit vote back in 16. He certainly helped deliver Boris into the leadership role, and he helped deliver the majority which Boris enjoys. So I'm not saying he did it on his own, but he did make significant contribution. And he's a maverick, and I think, he probably grated in some people, but he had achievements. What has Carrie achieved? Like nothing, absolutely nothing. But of course, she netted herself Boris, didn't she? Yeah.
The simple fact is that, in my opinion, the first day I was a barrister, I won my case. Okay. On that day, I was a brilliant starter of a barrister. I was amazing. I was a fine advocate, and I was a complete Rottweiler for my client's cause. A year later, I'd lost a few, and 23 years later, I'd lost quite a lot. I was not as stellar a barrister after 23 years in the court of public opinion as I was on day one, when all I'd ever done was one case and won it. So I had 100% record on day one. It did nothing but go down. So if you're in your 50s, 40s, you've done stuff, okay? If you've never offended anybody, you're a complete pussy, and you're a coward and you're a sycophant. Dominic Cummings was not paid to be Mr. Popular. He was paid to be Mr. Clever. Lee Kane, frankly, I'd never heard of the guy. before last week, and I don't think many people had, but maybe that's to his credit. We hadn't heard about him, that the story wasn't about him. The story was always about what he did. I don't know. The communications out of Downing Street, well, how could they be worse? How could they be better? I mean, Downing Street's not exactly delivering good news, and the communications chief is only asked to transmit the news. They're not asked to make up the policy around the news.
No.
Their job is specifically about delivering the briefings, delivering the messages. So how could you improve Downing Street's messages? Lockdown. Oh, let's call it Lulu lockdown, because that's much fluffier and softer. That's what people really want to hear. And it's not the economy, it's the schmeconomy. And don't worry, we'll put a solar panel up in your playing field. And don't worry about being obese, and don't worry that COVID disproportionately affects obese people. We're just going to make you more obese. And your public service now is to sit on your sofa for 4 months this year. I mean, okay, I made all of those messages really nice, because obese people are really lovely and soft when you touch them and cuddle them. I mean, for God's sake, how can you Macron's so much better. I've been saying this for a hell of a lot longer. I know my Brexity buddies won't like it because he's such a federalist EU politician, but actually right now, Macron is absolutely nailing it, because Macron comes out, says, I'm sorry we messed up when we did, but I've got no option. Cases are out of control. I'm advised this is the only option. Hello, goodbye, and I'm off. There are no questions. There's no anatomical dissection of his decision maker. There's no Kunzberg and Peston blathering for hours. Macron is a very strong man, a very strong leader. That's what we need.
Whereas Boris has shown significant weakness, which initially I think many of us said, well, he's got, he's had COVID, he's gone through a bad bout, understandable, and we could allow for that. But actually, no, Rebecca, since then, I'm afraid Boris is going down. In fact, he's plummeting in, I reckon, general esteem. And the responsibility for that, he has to have some responsibility of that. Because as you say, politicians decide, then the advisors push it out and they pump it out through the PR channels. But you have to be responsible. But I find this, and I read an editorial in the Guardian, and I actually kind of almost found myself agreeing with it, because at a time of pandemic and lots of concerns in the economy and all this other stuff, which affects everybody, it's really unseemly to see that this, as you said, cat fight or whatever else you want to call it in Downing Street. And but it's been brewing. I mean, Carrie Symonds is she's on the lunatic green fringe, and it seems now that what we're being told, again being leaked out, is that 2021 will see more exciting green policies. Which, and I think this is a point I saw you making, and it's a good point. You see all those red wall. The red wall, the Labour voters that moved across to the Tories, they will not put up with this sort of pandering to eco-lunacy. And this is going to cost lots of Conservative seats. It could cost the Conservatives a government if it continues, don't you think?
Well, I think it's not just the red walls. It's actually the marginal seats. But I think the majority of the country and the majority of your viewers here tonight will agree with me when I say we are bothered about far more fundamental, basic things. Now, on my tweet today, I said, well, it's the economy. But when it comes to the economy, the green economy, we haven't sorted the other economy out. So why don't you sort everything else before you start dealing with the fluff on the top of the icing on top of the cake? You're nowhere near being in a position to deal with the environment. There is no climate emergency, and most Tory voters would agree with me when I say it's not that simple. You don't cover a field with solar panels and solve the problem. And
no.
You don't have to spend that long discussing it with people who are Tory voters. They tend to be naturally cynical. The Leave voters, very analytical in their thinking, not prepared to be fed the status quo, the anti-globalists. I'm saying all the things that brought about Brexit is not a green agenda, because people who live in the real world, i.e. not in Richmond, to choose one constituency on purpose, we don't have buses driving down the end of our road every minute. We don't have an underground. We are reliant on cars. And actually, a lot of people don't have a parking space outside their house. Where are they going to plug their bloody electric cars into? If they haven't got electricity, if they haven't got their own electricity source, how are they going to do it? I mean, this is just, it's about making city centres cleaner. I get that. Speak to children who work in lithium mines. They might not agree that this is such a great idea, or the cobalt mines that, by the way, China has bought up all the way across the middle of Africa. You are giving so much power to China over this green revolution. It is China who's cashing in on everything, and they are such idiots that somebody with a degree in theatre studies is now dictating which bloody fishing waters the government is suddenly protecting. What?
Well, on the subject of cars, which is a kind of fundamental British thing, the notion that even today, I think it's been suggested that the Chancellor may look to tax people based on the number of miles. For every mile that you drive, you could be hit by an additional tax. In addition to which, by 2030, petrol and diesel cars, that's it, end of the line for those things. This is all. If we had no other problems, you could maybe look at some of these things. But this is being pushed right up the agenda, and I think it's in the face of many natural Conservative voters. Rebecca, many Conservative voters don't live in the inner cities. Let's be honest. They live in the shires. They live in the country. What are they? As you say, no buses, no underground. They need their cars, and yet at this particular time when we've got COVID and all the issues that it brings, I'm reading all this crap about, tax the motorists more and take away their cars. I'm sorry, that this is the road to perdition, and it's a road to electoral defeat. I wonder, do you think those Conservative MPs that are witnessing all this in the backbenches, I wonder what their thoughts are?
Oh, they're rubbing their hands with glee, because the obstacle in Boris's team was Cummings. Now, you remember that when Boris was elected, we were all told, it's not so much about the man. He's not a details man, but he knows how to collect a team around him. He knows how to motivate talent. No, he doesn't. He knows when Carrie's offering him sexual favors or walking out on him, if he doesn't protect 4 million fish in an ocean we've never heard of. That's how Boris is led. Weak, dithering, really absolutely no use at all. It's not just the green agenda. It's Brexit as well. And I don't want to worry people, but the MPs now are absolutely clapping more for themselves than the NHS, because finally they've got a bit of relevance, which they're so desperate for. And let me just remind you the basis on which MPs get elected by their constituencies. It's luck. It's nothing luck, because if you represent the colour of the National Party that your constituents like, you'll get in, which is why so many people who are ex-marketing, ex-local press, thing, ex-spads, ex-done nothing else in their lives beforehand, ex-cronies, they get in. That is not a guarantee of ability. It is availability. It is nothing more than that. So these talentless gits that are in Parliament at the moment, the experts and the journalists, they're the ones who are lining themselves up for the jobs. Oh, and the ex-military who think they really are something special. Another group. So, they're talentless. They're talentless. I mean, I'd rather have Dominic Cummings.
Oh, likewise. I mean, I think Dominic Cummings, he was passionate about the things that he believed in, and he did have his own vision, and he wanted to change things, and he wanted to clean out the proverbial Aegean stables. He wanted to do those things. And that was the exciting, for me, that was what was exciting about the win back in December. Well, okay, he gets a chance to implement all these things with Boris. It's been a massive disappointment, and I'm not alone. I'm sure, Rebecca, as there are millions around the country tonight that have looked on at what we've seen from Boris. And we have more to talk about Boris, because it's not just the Dominic Cummings and Carrie Simons issues, but he's been so disappointing. People said to me, back last year, they said, but the thing about Boris is he's a chancer, and he checks to see which way the wind is blowing, and he goes that way. And I didn't overly think it. I didn't necessarily agree with it. I've concluded that there's a significant amount of truth in that. I wonder what you think.
Yeah, I mean, when I was delighted that, the Tories won last year, really my big emotional hold on it was more liberal and conservative policies, less tax, and Brexit. So that was really what the general election was in December 2019. And I always knew that Dominic Cummings.
Yeah, keep going.
I always knew he was part of the package, and I'm perfectly happy with that. I don't have to elect him. I just have to be confident that actually Dominic Cummings, he had his finger on the pulse. I know he has his finger on the pulse. I know it because he follows me on Twitter, and he does so anonymously. And he's told me he's revealed himself to me. So, I know that he listens to people. He's not an egotist at all.
No, he's not. No.
He's quite antisocial, and he is a genuine wave maker. And that's a good thing, because we have, since Tony Blair had a chumocracy in this country for 23 years, we have been ruled by an incompetent civil service, incompetent ministers by and large. There are a few exceptions, and wishy-washy prime ministers who spend their time listening focus groups.
Yeah,
that is the sum total of intellect. They give all the plum jobs to their mates. If you blow smoke up their backsides, you get a constituency.
Yeah,
it's a chococracy. So I'm just depressed by it all. And by the way, I'm standing for election next May at the moment under the Tory banner.
Yeah,
I stand zero chance right now, because the Robert Jenrick policies on housing have stuffed the marginal seats, and this behaviour in Downing Street is affecting all of us badly.
I think the other aspect of it is, Rebecca, that Nigel Farage has stepped once again back into the political limelight, and although the issues he wants to stand on are perhaps different to the last time, he's a guy a bit like Dominic Cummings, I think, who is able to put his finger on the national pulse on what people care about. And I think the Conservative Party would have cause for concern if, as seems likely, we're going to stagger through another 6 months of COVID restrictions and so on and so forth. That is going to be a potential problem, I think, come next May, regardless of what Labour do and what or Lib Dems or anything the rest of it. The Reform Party could steal Conservative clothes, I think, yet again. And I wonder, does that concern the Conservative Party?
Well, it concerns me, but at the same time, I think, well, should I stand for the Reform Party? Is that closer to what I really feel?
Well, the Reform Party is closer to, I think, what natural Conservatives feel. It seems to be about, we want a real Brexit. We want to get on with our lives. We want not to have cancel culture. We don't want this wacko echo agenda. We want to just be, just be able to get on with the things that we like to do. But from everything I see from Carrie Symonds, in particular her, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to make life very difficult. And yet Boris seems to be enchanted by her wiles and seems to be wanting to. He's given. I was reading a book last night on the death of Jesus Christ, and it was a historical book, not written in the theology side.
Is he dead?
Appears so. Bad news. Sorry. Spoiler alert. He is dead. And the bit I was reading last night was about how Salome, who was the stepdaughter of Herod Antipas, she called for his, because her mother hated John the Baptist. She called for his head, and literally his head was severed from his body and presented on a silver plate to her. And in a way, a metaphorical way, isn't it? That's what's happened with Dominic Cummings, isn't it? Carrie's called for his head, and Boris has given it.
Yeah, and Allegra Stratton, don't let her off the hook either. I despair. One little thing I read was that the decision to choose Allegra over the other candidate who was the final two was decided by a focus group.
I didn't read that.
Yeah, everything this blasted government does is passed through a focus group first. Every single decision goes through a focus group. And this is why I'm so frustrated. David, it is so bad. Do you know who I'd welcome back? Is George Osborne, the Machiavellian Chancellor, George Osborne. I know he was a Remainer, but post-Brexit, that is the man I would have running the show, or in the Chancery. I'd have him as the Chancellor. I miss the strength of conviction. I miss all of that. And I think a lot of people do. And because we can't find a Tory who's got it now, we are looking to Nigel Farage. We absolutely are. Their big mistake was not giving him a functional role in this administration. Huge mistake. But that's because they ran it through a focus group, and the focus group went, oh, no, I don't think we can have Nigel Farage. He's a racist. So
who isn't? Who isn't, Rebecca? In 2020, we're all racist. But you mentioned on the topic of Brexit, do you think between now and the end of the year, what's your reading of what do you think is going to happen? Will Boris cave? Will Boris accept a no deal? Will there be some sort of middle way deal? What do you think is going to happen between now and the end of December?
Well, of course, no sooner had Dominic Cummings appeared with his box at the front of Downing Street than Simon Coveney started tweeting about the internal markets bill and how if Britain sought to break international law, then they would they would not hesitate to be firmer with Britain. They're not moving their red lines. Well, David Frost is part of the Vote Leave campaign, but his problem is that he's an employed person doing the job that he is told to do by Boris. Now, Boris's problem is he's lost Cummings, carries no substitute on leave, I can assure you. And so the Remainiacs in the cabinet are now going to start putting pressure on Boris to walk back from our red lines, because they're now going to be too scared of a no deal. Remember, Remainers are very, very scared of a no deal. It's the Brexiteers who are brave and say, no, we can do it, we'll cope. I mean, for heaven's sake, under a coronavirus pandemic, we'll definitely be able to cope. You know, it's something that now Boris hasn't got the baffle of Dominic Cummings in place to prevent the EU from pushing harder, because it did look as though the EU was softening its stance. It was Macron has been telling the French for a long time now, you're not going to get what you want with the fishing, because if you don't allow us to get a deal, there'll be no deal, so you'll end up with less. So he was already pushing the narrative with his fishermen in France that we needed a deal, and I'm afraid you're going to suffer as a result of it. Now, Barnier and the Irish, who are very instrumental in the Brexit negotiations, Simon Coveney especially, they have got their tails up, because they feel now that they can appeal to the House of Lords, they can appeal to Parliament again, to push through a deal that many Brexiteers will not be happy with, for the sake of having a deal. What I would prefer, if I was doing it, is I would say, look, we'll have no deal, and then as time moves through, we will just agree things as and when we need to agree them. But in the meantime, we're off to New York, to Washington, and we're going to be discussing joining the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. So cheerio, EU, for a little while. We're flying across the Pacific to speak to them. So this loss of Cummings is big. It is big for Britain.
I think so, Rebecca. I feel that. I mean, again, I think you're right. Simon Coveney is basically, I mean, he's a puppet of Brussels. He says what they think, and he said it very quickly, what they think. They see this as weakness. They see it as a degree of chaos, which it is as well. And that means that they will push back. Whereas I do think that they were getting to the point where they were going to say, okay, you know, after much huffing and puffing, we will give you roughly the deal in most areas that you wanted. But do you think the Tory party could survive with the voters a kind of an extension of the Brexit period? Do you think that's possible?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Those 80 seats are Brexit voters. That is what gave whichever party it was. If it was the bonkers Green Party who said we're going to get Brexit done, we would have all voted for them. Whichever party promised to do it was going to get the votes. If they do not deliver on Brexit, they are sunk, because Nigel Farage will win parliamentary seats next time. He will win them, because he won't back down. There is no way that man will back down. The other one is Richard Tice, who will decimate Sean Bailey in the London mayoral elections, which will bring Sadiq Khan back.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. But it is going to be, you know, I think a real problem for the Conservatives in these next couple of months, and unnecessarily, you would say, because there was no real reason for this. But you mentioned the sisterhood. or the coven, as I've called them, the coven in Downing Street. And you see, here's the thing, Rebecca. I have so much respect for strong professional women. You said earlier on, professional women shouldn't cry, and nor should professional men, for that matter. It's gender's neither here nor there. But when I see some of the stuff that's been coming out over the last couple of days from within, and it's from within the sisterhood, and then the journalists around them, the sisterhood journalists, it just makes, I think it's bad for women. It's for professional women. It makes them look just embarrassing. What do you think? As a professional woman, what do you think?
I'm embarrassed. They are not feminists. They're not feminists. They're virtually prostituting themselves to get what they want. That's not feminism. It's all about ability. It's about taking advantage of the same opportunities, and forging yourself forward on your own merit. It's not about patronage. It's not about being manipulative and abusive and swinging a narrative to suit your purposes. Who does that sound like? I'll give you a clue. She spent half her time vomiting down a toilet and had a princess attached to her name. Carrie will bring down Boris, just as Diana brought down Charles, for the same reason.
I agree. In fact, it's interesting because you've got your hashtag Yoko Nutnuts, but I did see your tweet where you referenced more Diana, less Yoko. And on reflection, I think you are right in that. I think she will bring Boris down. Certainly, if not the government, she'll bring Boris down. And I think that's now that fuse has been lit. And it's ticking, and Boris is only himself to blame. But these women who are jumping up and down with delight at the political demise of Cummings, it's remarkably short-sighted stuff. It really, really is.
Was he sexist? Was there a toxic lad culture? I mean, was there? I'd never heard of it, but suddenly there was. I mean, and so what? I was a criminal barrister for years. Talk about lad culture. It was actually quite fun. I loved every minute of it. But, so what? Get over yourself and just do your job. If you don't like the lad culture, if you can't beat them, join them, right? If you can't join them, just shut your door and just get on with your job. I don't have any truck with these comments about lad culture. I frankly don't believe it.
I don't think so. I remember you remember the press conference that Dominic Cummings gave in the Downing Street Garden after the whole business of the trip up to the northeast. Yeah, and I watched that, and I have to say, Rebecca, he struck me as a very human person, very authentic, straight talking. He wasn't bullshitting it. He came across to me, I thought, not really well. Now, of course, I remember the media all calling for his head, but then to me, that's a mark of respect for Cummings, that they should respond to that. But I thought he came across really well and very human. And actually, unlike Boris, I mean, he was able to sort of, in his own way, put his hand up, but he was also given a very credible human explanation. So I don't see him as laddish, maybe eccentric perhaps, but hey, that's a different thing.
The guy had a 4-year-old child who had been in hospital with breathing problems. His wife had COVID. He had COVID. He was delirious. What could they do? Remember where we were. If they had been both hospitalized at the same time, there was no way they could get childcare. They are from the northeast. Her parents, because her father's a baron. Her parents have a large house, and they stayed in one of the cottages in the house. Yeah. He's from working class Durham background. What were they going to do? They had to go somewhere. Nanny not an option because the child's got COVID, so couldn't infect the nanny. What if they had both been hospital or, God forbid, put on a ventilator? How did they know at the time? So they acted in the best interests of their child. I just, where is the humanity? These are the same type of people who were delighted when Trump got COVID. They were delighted. The same group of people.
Yeah.
Where is the humanity? And if he had committed an offence, he would have been prosecuted for it.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. They have picked over his political bones ever since that event. But I have to say, in all of this, my sympathies lie with Dominic Cummings. I don't care what other people think. I think he's going to, in history will record this as a massive loss to the Conservative Party. Yet, at this moment in time, right now, today, I think you're right. There'll be lots of backbenchers cheering, and there'll be other opportunists around the cabinet table happy. I was actually quite disappointed to read, I don't know if you saw this, that Priti Patel apparently, I saw her name referenced. It may not be true, but she was one of the movers against Cummings. Would that surprise you?
David, I think they're all craven. Every last one of them. I just honestly, I'd want the whole bloody lot out and start again. I really, really would. Get normal people in there. Unfortunately for me, I've been overly involved in politics over the last few years, and I have yet to meet somebody who impresses. I really, really do. You know, having worked for years with either doctors and nurses who really know their stuff in the health service, I then went over to law, actually working with people who really know their stuff, other barristers, solicitors, judges, working with professional people, all working hard, all to professional standards. You sign up to professional standards and an ethical code as a barrister. You can't be a barrister unless you meet the intellectual hurdles. I've not seen any of that other than craven people who just want attention. They're insecure. They're constantly craving attention and applause for what they do. I mean, believe this or not, I was asked by the Conservative group in Winchester to go on a public meeting by sort of Microsoft Teams, because the guy I'm standing against in the elections next year at the moment was speaking about transport policy. And I battered him about a little bit. I mean, really, it was nothing very much at all, because I was allowed to ask a question, and I ended up, exposing him for something he actually said during the answer. And I've been applauded and lauded for it ever since. And they keep saying, oh, ask Becky how to ask a question and how to get back at somebody. I said, I berated him over not wearing a cycle helmet. I mean, do you really think that's going to win an election, that I wear a cycle helmet and he doesn't? Are you really that stupid? You think that people care that I nailed him in a question in a council meeting over a cycle helmet, for God's sake? That's the level they operate at. It is.
Sadly, from bitter experience, I'm only acutely aware of that. But Rebecca, just moving on sort of quickly, we've always talked about this expression, follow the science, and it's been a bit of a mantra from our friend Boris. And then this story popped up. So there we have Boris self-isolating, folks. He's self-isolating for, 2 weeks?
No, David's gone.
Oh, is he?
Yes, he's gone. Right. Okay, so I'll pick up on this, because I do have an opinion on this. David, are you back? Just say hello when you are.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Okay, you disappeared off and I took over. So basically...
Carry on, Rebecca. The floor is yours.
Yes, so this is the question of what immunity have you got. Now, everybody who has had COVID has not actually had a positive test to confirm that they've had COVID. So that's number one. Number two, if you have had COVID, surely you've got the best immunization possible, which is you've got all the T4 cells and you've got all the antibodies. So why not have an antibody passport? Why not do, instead of these flawed PCR testing, why don't they do antibody tests on everybody? Why don't they bother to take a blood sample from every single person in the country, Moonshot, or 1 million people in Birmingham, just as an example? Do a big sample and find out now, this week, how many people have antibodies. If they've got antibodies, give them a certificate to say they've got antibodies. That would be the way to do it. It's not fair on everybody, I know that, but tough. It's a pandemic. Nothing's fair in a pandemic. So, you know, Boris is merely having to comply with the rules that his government has put in place.
That's true. Yeah.
In the early days of COVID, of course, they were barely doing 5,000 to 10,000 tests a day. They then ramped up to 30 by the end of March. So actually, all those many people who had COVID cannot be confirmed to have had COVID. Boris can, because we know he had it, because he had a positive test. But my answer to that is either have immunization certificate or antibody certificate. They are one and the same.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about Boris, I mean, you're right, Rebecca, he probably has been hoisted on the petard of his own regulations as regarding this self-isolation. But again, I mean, I have to be honest, and I completely question the validity of anyone self-isolating on the basis of a positive PCR test until such times as we're informed of things such as false positive rate of PCR tests, which is still curiously hidden from us, and the general ambiguities. And because this is going out on YouTube, I'll put it no stronger than that. The areas of ambiguity around the tests and so on and so forth, you know. But yeah, so the Prime Minister is in glorious self-isolation. So how does that work then? Does he, I presume, does he hold his government by Zoom? How is he doing that then?
Well, it's all very odd, because what the media is saying, well, basically he's out of action. So does that mean if you work from home, you're out of action? You don't actually work? Because that's what they seem to be saying, is that he's not working. Well, of course he's working. He's WF like everybody else who sits in their pajama bottoms all day. He's doing the rest of us had to do anyway. So he should, of course, be working. It's just, just the media, again, kneecapping him, saying he's not around.
So I must admit, I hadn't seen that actually, that that suggested that because of this self-isolation, he's not working. I mean, as you say, obviously, you'd be bored out if you're a prime minister of this country don't really have that luxury. I wouldn't have thought, to just say, right, folks, I'm taking 2 weeks off. But it is, I think, to me, Rebecca, it's almost symbolic of a fallen Boris, not just fallen through the loss of, well, his sacrifice of Dominic Cummings to Simmons, but also this again recurrent COVID issue. He can't have COVID, can he?
Of course not, and he can't carry it either.
No. I've been trying to tell people that. Yeah, you can't. Yeah. No, you
can't, because that's what immunity confers. You don't shed virus if your T4 cells have attached to them and disabled them. You will shed something that looks like the virus, but it's got a T4 cell attached to it. So it's not going to do anybody any harm. You know, you get 1 billion in there and 1 billion will come out with T4 cells attached. No, he hasn't got. This is the myopia of a test and trace system, which, by the way, I said this back in March, this bug is not amenable to contact tracing because of the unknown incubation period. And I said there will be very poor compliance with people succumbing to testing because A, they don't want to be traced on their mobile phones, and B, they won't want their contacts done. I know this because I have dealt with contact tracing myself as a nurse during the AIDS epidemic. It was very easy. Who have you slept with? It was really easy. And so it can only really be transmitted by sexual intercourse. So they give us a list of who they'd slept with. And you'd first of all check that nobody you knew was on that list and who you slept with was on that list. And that was it.
Yeah.
But it just is not amenable in the same way. And so the failure of test and trace is actually what Boris Johnson is suffering with now, which is a huge amount of money, 10% of the annual NHS budget has been spent on test and trace. And by the way, a third of all fuel revenues from car fuels has been spent on track and trace. And you cannot run an economy where healthy people are being treated as sick people and sick people are not being treated as sick people. And that is where we are with test and trace. It's rubbish.
Yeah. I mean, actually, but there's so much rubbish. Like, for example, I heard our health minister here in Northern Ireland declare today, or yesterday, he declared that they would make sure, the government will make sure that COVID patients will always have a bed in hospital at the expense, unfortunately, of other people with conditions such as cancer or, cardiac illness or many other potentially terminal diseases. I'm afraid those folks, they ain't getting a bed. But if you've got a cough and the sniffles and you've had a positive PCR, then you're in. I mean, there's something so wrong about that, Rebecca. There's something very, very wrong about that for me.
I mean, I don't know if you saw the results of this project they did up in Liverpool with the mass testing. After you remove the false positives, which were quoted, by the way, on Liverpool, it's 0.5% positives. Out of 100,000, that's 500 people are false positive. Do you know how many positives there were in Liverpool out of the 100,000? 700. Take away 500 is 200.
Yeah, 200. And it's November. It's respiratory season. So you're going to get, in fact, actually, I think I'm right in saying, Rebecca, that the flu virus seems to be pretty low on radar because the novel cards, the COVID-2, COVID-19 virus seems to be still, it's the dominant, more aggressive virus this year. So basically,
no, that's not what it is. No.
Okay, tell me what it is.
COVID-2 killed all of the people who would have had flu this autumn. It killed them in March. Normally, people don't die of respiratory illnesses in March, April, May, and June. They normally die sort of mid to end of October. November, December, January are the big months for influenza. You're right. Once. You only die once. They died in April, May, June, so they're not available to the influenza this year. Yeah. They've already died.
And that's a fair pushback against me. But the recognition is therefore that the folks who would have, because we had a relatively soft flu season in 2019, I think, here in the UK and in some of the other countries as well, and that impacted in the curve as well that we saw in the thingy. But as you said, the cost of all of that in Liverpool Rebecca. You know, that massive cost to find out that 200 people in the city of what, I know what the population of Liverpool is, million?
Couple of million, I don't know, yeah, one
Couple
and a
of
half,
mil.
say,
You
yeah.
know, I mean, that's lunatic. But Boris seems to be inspired by that, and he wants to do it in Birmingham and and all our other large cities. And that it's not Operation Moonshot. It's Operation Moonbeam, because it's Moon Battery, isn't it? It's lunatic.
It's a complete and utter waste of money. It's a complete waste of money. But you complain about your health secretary, Matt Hancock, on television, these unblinking lizard eyes.
Yeah.
He said to people, if you don't wear a mask, if you don't socially isolate, you will be responsible for the fact that COVID patients get treated in preference to cancer patients. It's like it's your fault. It's your fault if cancer patients die. No, Matt Hancock, it's your fault if cancer patients die. It's not our fault. We're not here to save the NHS. The NHS is here to save us. You've got this wrong, Minty. And for all the money they are pissing up a wall on testing 100,000 people in Liverpool to find 200 asymptomatic COVID sufferers. What?
Yeah.
They want to repeat that?
Yeah.
Even 700, if you don't take out the false positives, even 700 doesn't justify it. It just doesn't justify it.
Well, this is where I think ultimately, as this process carries on, this is where people continue to lose faith or just simply don't believe what they're being told. Because, for example, we had, the 4 weeks ago, we had Whitty and Vance and Boriss rocking up to give us the bad news about the 4,000 deaths that were going to happen by the 13th of November, and the actual number was what, 360. Yeah, that's quite a gap there as well in terms of credibility. If I forecast financially on that basis, I'd be out of a job. But apparently, Vance and Whitty can do that, and so so I just don't think people believe them much anymore. But Matt Hancock, I do have to concur. Matt Hancock makes our health secretary, look, well, not impressive, but look merely mediocre. But that's because Hancock is a lizard creature, as you rightly called him, Rebecca. I see he went on. He went on with Piers Morgan this morning. I didn't actually see it. I don't know if you saw it.
I didn't. No, of course not. I wouldn't watch either.
Couldn't watch that.
Absolutely. No. But David, the most cynical thing about all of this is that cancer deaths are not going to are not going to be evident for another 5 years. Because
yes, over time. Yeah.
That's the life cycle of cancer, because the earlier you get it, the quicker the treatments. Now we have some really, really clever treatments. It's not whack it out radiotherapy and chemotherapy, and whichever doesn't kill you, you might survive. We're a hell of a lot better in cancer treatment now. A lot of people just take biomarkers and do extremely well, but that's all about early intervention with cancer, and it's all about the screening program. So we screen 350,000 people a year for cancer, and 35,000 people are newly diagnosed. What happens is the tumor, depending what sort of tumor it is, if left untreated, they will grow, but they will grow at different rates. So one type of breast cancer will grow a hell of a lot faster than a skin cancer. A bowel cancer will tend to grow very, very slowly, but people don't present with symptoms until they're actually quite advanced with bowel cancers. So, and then these people, they'll have their lump. They are given delay after delay after delay, then told they can't have their chemotherapy just yet. So then you're making treatment harder. A lot of people will die from the treatment because the treatment will be more severe. And then the metastatic disease kicks in. And so people start getting the secondaries. That takes about 5 years. And so we are really, it's so cynical because there's an election in 3. Remember, they're obsessed with focus groups. Most focus groups wouldn't have a clue at what an all-cause mortality graph looks like. And that's the number we need to look at. And the analysis of this pandemic cannot happen for another 15 years. And they will look back and say, oh gosh, 2025, there was a massive spike in deaths from secondary cancer. Why? Oh, well, there's a pandemic in 2020. That's what they're saying.
But that is, Rebecca, that's the cynicism of politics, because by 2025, a lot of those at the forefront of this thing at the moment, they will have gone. They'll be in the Lords, or they'll have gone.
Yeah.
But, you know, and so sadly, the people who lose their lives, there's going to be no one to blame. It's almost like it's not a victimless crime, but it's a crime where the culprits always get away. And I find that's pretty dispiriting, actually, you know, but there's no doubt that is what, I'm just looking at some of the comments here. Yeah, it's
the sort of crime where Portuguese politicians get dragged up in front of the courts. I don't know if you saw that the Portuguese courts declared that lockdowns were illegal and unjustified on the science.
Well, good for them. I mean, but at the same time, Rebecca, we need to wrap this one up shortly. But I don't know if you saw as well. I saw more scientists. By scientists, I guess behavioral scientists, not the epidemiologist kind, but the preferred kind of government. They're suggesting that we might need to have another. They just can't wait to get them, can they? We might need to have another lockdown in the lead up to Christmas. And then in the new year, well, it's going to be very tough, you know. So potentially a new year lockdown. This is not going to end well, I have to tell you. I think it's bad. It's just bad.
I've just seen Billy Piper complaining about kidney pain. If you've got kidney pain, you've either got a kidney stone or you've got a high-level urinary tract infection. So telephone call your GP. It's highly unlikely to be cancer if you've got pain. If you've got blood, different matter. But if you get your GP to give you some antibiotics.
I mean, the difficulty there, Rebecca, is, I mean, a lot of GPs now, it's very difficult to get to see a GP. And in fact, actually, another thing I saw today, one of a local hospital here is going to, they're innovating through A&E triage over the telephone from A&E. So I was wondering, so if I break my arm, for example, or think I've broken my arm, and I can phone with the other hand, what am I going to be told, Rebecca? Just hold the phone closer to your arm. Surely to God, that's not the way to deal with it. Why are we putting people off who, I know lots of wasters go to A&E, I know that as well, but if you break your arm, you go to A&E, surely to God.
Yeah, so that you have put your finger on the problem. But you have to ask why. It's very easy to point the finger and blame the punters for too many people going to hospital. Why do too many people go to hospital? Too many people go to hospital because there are no longer out-of-hours GP services. GPs in their renegotiated contract back in 2003, thank you, Tony Blair, because you did this, they all did doing their out-of-hours service. Therefore, there are no domiciliary visits by GPs. Therefore, the culture changed and people scared because they don't know what to do. They've got a child with a rash. They don't know what a meningitis rash looks like. They've got a splinter in the finger. They don't know if it's deep or not. They're too scared or frightened of blood to actually just pull the damn thing out like I would. But people have common sense. Well, I'm not blaming them for that. They're scared. They go to A&E. In the old days, they'd have called their GP. So it's the GPs, which is why the A&Es are overfull of people who don't need to be there. So what is the solution? The solution is not to deal with what's in A&E. The solution actually is you've got all this bloody money. You've spent 13 billion on Dido, what's her face, test and trace. you set up a room with a perspex screen with a GP in it? With a GP in it. And if the GP needs to feel you and touch you and, you know, feel the lump or whatever, put some bloody PPE on there and then. Do it. You're in a hospital. Have the GPs in the hospitals. Because you know what, David? My daughter is working in A&E as a doctor. She's in PPE. She looks after people. She does the GP's job in A&E. The GP should be doing the GP's job.
I think we're right, Rebecca. The GPs, I feel, have been proven to have fallen short in their obligation to their patients. And yeah, I know it's probably very convenient to just do these telephone calls and whatnot, but people need to see people, and especially people, as you said, if you've got some relatively minor thing, but that nonetheless is giving you pain, you should be able to go and see a GP first line. That's gone, but unfortunately, that's the awful reality of our NHS. See, I was quite.
Have you ever heard of the doorknob diagnosis?
No, tell me.
So this is actually quite a legitimate phenomenon, particularly with elderly people who, I don't know if it's the same where you are, but certainly in England and Wales now, you can only go to the GP with one problem. You can only present one complaint. Now, for an elderly person, they have multiple problems. Quite often they're interconnected, and this is utterly ridiculous policy that they impose really, really hard in Wales, and which is why the healthcare in Wales is exceptionally poor. But the doorknob diagnosis is as the patient walks out the door of the GP surgery, they say, oh, and by the way, just as they get their hand on the doorknob, that is the moment where the patient really tells you what's the matter with them. That's where the diagnosis is made. Or maybe the GP watches the patient walk out, might see, you know, a shuffling gait or a dizziness or something like that. You'd never pick the doorknob diagnosis up on a Zoom call. Medicine is not a science. It's an art as well. And it's about reading people. You can't read people over a computer screen. You just can't do it.
No, but we've got some comments on the stream here that are disturbing. Like Frida says, you know, she was getting monthly blood tests and now they're cut back to 3 months. To the point you made earlier, Rebecca, you know, well, I'm sure everything will be fine, Frida, but in other scenarios, this is not a good thing to happen. People do need to have received treatment. I actually feel, Rebecca, again, just to finish in this, I think probably, when I used to occasionally be in and out of the GPs, sort of monthly annual checkups and so on and so forth, and you'd see in the waiting room a lot of very elderly people, I think, possibly living on their own, and they were in to see the GP for whatever. Now, I doubt that those people would have the competence, let's just put it as it is, to clearly define symptoms over the phone with a GP and explain precisely what the issue is. So how many of those folks are going undiagnosed until they die?
Well, and can I just add into this? Add in the fact that many GPs do not have English as their first language, or were not taught in medicine in English. I am automatically, by the way, excluding every Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi, Nigerian, Ghanaian, Australian, New Zealand doctor. I am talking about European Union doctors who came here, freedom of movement, who could not speak English. They can speak medicine in their own language, but they were not taught medicine in English. The Commonwealthers all are. Every medical school in India and all those Commonwealth countries, they're all taught in English, precisely so they can come here and work. And by the way, they're educated in English anyway. So I'm not talking about, you know, sort of people of colour I am talking about white, Caucasian, European doctors. How can a 90-year-old who doesn't hear very well possibly convey over a computer to somebody who doesn't have English as a first language? These are really simple factors that really affect good healthcare. Communication is the most important, and it's destroyed when you're talking to your doctor anything other than face to face. But I'm telling you, there is a middle ground with COVID. Put the bloody GPs in the hospital in an area. They can run walk-in clinics, have 10 GPs, 20 GPs, spend the money on a GP walk-in. There you are. QA, please. Dr. A, that's that Q. Socially
good.
That's what I do.
The other thing is, Rebecca, you could, if COVID's such a big issue, deploy the Nightingale hospitals and have them just for COVID to relieve this, if they need relieved, and I doubt it, but if the main NHS hospitals need to have relief so they can see these patients, then there are options there. The whole thing's a shambles. It has to be said. I mean, it's not that I have any confidence in Labour, because they would make it even worse, I suspect. But this is a shambolic response to an issue, and I know there's other people. I've seen the comments in the stream, and I do understand about things like the World Economic Forum. I understand about the Great Reset. We're not talking about this tonight. I just simply wanted to talk to Rebecca about what I see as a chaos around Downing Street and around Boris in particular. And I think there will be consequences, Rebecca.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just going quickly back to the Liverpool study, what was the purpose of doing Liverpool if you don't actually follow the science? Because even if you take the numbers at their highest, say the population's 1 million, okay? If you extrapolate up, 7,000 people have COVID based on the mass testing of 100, assuming there are 1 million. Put it up to 7,000. Of those 7,000, 80% will not know they've got coronavirus. So only a fifth of the 7,000 will get symptoms. Of that fifth, only 8% or less now will go into hospital. The numbers are shrinking back all the time, which demonstrates that this virus is not the big scare story. No. It's a nasty virus. If you get it badly, yes, it's horrible, but then so is influenza. So are a lot of other things.
A lot of things,
Hit by a car is a pretty awful thing to happen. So, yes, life is full of risk. And to shut everything down is the wrong thing to do now. Now it's the wrong thing to do. It was the right thing to do before. But Boris, what has been demonstrated to me is this isn't a man who surrounds himself with talent. This is a man who is obsessed with popularity. That is what he's obsessed with. And that's probably my final word, is this is popularity, nothing more.
Well, on that note, Princess Yoko Nutnuts, I will wish you a good evening. Thank you for being part of the stream. Such a pleasure to have you, Rebecca, as normal on a Monday night. Thanks, everybody, for your comments on the stream. Lots of really interesting comments there. Unfortunately, we can't pick up every one of them, or we'd be here even longer than we are. But I do appreciate all your comments, and I do see the seriousness of some of them, by the way. So thanks for sharing those things with Rebecca and myself. And and that's it. So look, again, to those who watch this on replay on YouTube and who watch it over in Parler, do make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also follow Rebecca over on her Twitter, where she does sterling work. And I'll catch up with you folks in the next day or so. I've got a big thing happening on Wednesday, hopefully. I'll tell you more about that tomorrow. But in the meantime, that's it. It's good night from me.
Good night, everybody. Jed, get on the money next time. We expect you on at midday.
On that note, bye.
Bye.